Yeah, well, the study of syntropy is the study of nature, and syntropy applied to human ecology becomes syntropic human ecology, and I call that she, which I kind of like. And that's really the exploration of human nature in our natural orientation, and what is that based on? And so in our natural state, we are sovereign, we are free, we are all of these beautiful virtues, all of these beautiful word sounds, but what do they really mean? And what does it really constitute in our essence, in our innate and intrinsic being to be a human being? And my experience and my exploration is that we are feeling-based creatures, and we are social creatures. And so we thrive through being socially interactive, and we are, in that sense, social mammals. And Syntropy has, for me, the way that I call it, it's the missing link, and it's come out of syntropic agroforestry for me. But of course, Syntropy, the syntropic nature of life, has been here ever since, creation really emerged into this field. And so for us to now find the language and find the word sounds to articulate this living metric, what life is doing, how life is orientating itself, and what those strategies are, and how we as humans can align ourselves to navigate with life, as opposed to our entropic, cult-programmed ways of orientating ourselves mentally. That is not so much something that we consciously have chosen, but it's just something that we've been kind of bred into. A lot of it is through the study of Syntropy. I've really become aware that there is natural ways of navigating and unnatural ways of navigating. And any human being on the earth, when given the opportunity to reflect on whether they want to navigate in a natural frequency or an unnatural one, they have a tendency to go for the natural way of being. That unfortunately brings about a choice point in many of us that confronts us with the fact that we have been deeducated, we have been socially programmed and conditioned to operate in scarcity mentalities, control and domination mentalities, just to kind of keep ourselves safe. But when we return to Syntropy, when we study again and we open ourselves up to the living metric of living life, the life ways that nature, that life operates on, and we as humans, we are as much life as life outside of ourselves. So these strategies are alive in us. And that becomes a fascinating and beautiful space to explore. And gosh, that has been my field of exploration now for almost 5 years. And it's just beautiful. It's inspiring, it's motivating, and it's enlivening. So I'm glad to be here. And this is something that I see streaming into education for our younglings, that our industrial educational paradigm that we have at this point is not giving them the fulfillment to discover who they are. What is their talent and what is their function? What is really in their heart? What is their spirit within their organism really here for? Because each individual human comes to the earth with talents and gifts that are sort of like shrunken through the period of, I call it deeducation, to several outstreams that you can come into. You can end up being this or that or that or that or that. And the creative arts are being defunded. So we're because it doesn't make financial sense or whatever the reasoning around it is, it comes from entropy. It's not looking at our human community in the larger context of how do we honor the intrinsic values, because art and creative expression have been with humanity ever since the dawn of humanity. And so to actually emphasize and create emphasis for creative expression so that the uniqueness of the individual can actually sprout and emerge, to me, that's something that's going to stream into education at some point. And of course, Steiner and Montessori, these are forms of engaging with younglings that allows them to discover more about themselves. But as soon as they come out of that, you're back into the old mold, and that mold has a lot of cracks on it, and it's just being plastered and plastered, and actually it's being reinforced with more rebarb, and actually that part we just need to take off, and we just need to create it more firm, because the mentality that resides in our political system, as I see it, is all about economic growth, this infinite growth model that just keeps going up and up and up and up. It's like building a bridge off a cliff into infinity. And then as soon as it crumbles, we're just going to reinforce it. And we're just going to cut off any superfluous elements. But the superfluous elements that are being cut off is the heart of humanity, is the heart of community, is that fabric that really makes us feel, wow, we are alive, we are here to co-create. My orientations have been for years to figure out more about our natural human ecology, our that communal way that we lost, that indigenous way that we lost, and I've remembered so much along the way, and yet at the same time I'm still exploring very thoroughly how we can reconstitute a healthy, harmonious and thriving human ecology, and that word is maybe, human and ecology is not really often used together, but I found that is a very relevant term to start ascertaining how we can make communities actually function, how we can make organizations actually function, how we can get people in management actually comprehending that there's a human component that is and has been for the longest time in our industrial kind of societal framework been not spoken to. And that is the innate and that is the intrinsic humanity that we each have. There are natural forms of relating that even in business management, if these understandings would be applied, teams would start thriving and co-working together with more efficiency, with more joy, and with more outcomes that can be generated when we co-create from a place that is in alignment and meeting us in our natural ways of being that, to the best of my knowing, are currently being explored. But without understanding Syntropy, I do not see that humans are really going to get into the softer and into the simpler and into the, into the solutions that many find in whether they're running a business or whether they're running a community group or whether they want to start a community or whatever it is that involves humans. There are life ways that we haven't been taught, we haven't been raised with, because it's not been part of our upbringing and cultural sort of conditioning. And for me, questioning how we can reconstitute that is just, that's the gold. That, like, when we unlock those keys, when we can tap into that heart space where humans can then connect authentically in a real way, without there being any contracts, without there being any codependency, because there's actually a deeper understanding of what's going on, and we're not avoiding or we're not trying to dominate or control, because those mechanisms of relating have been useful, but many of us know them as survival mechanisms. This is what I see being a need to enter into the human consciousness, governance, finance, and the way that we as individuals relate to ourselves, the way that we relate to our landscape, the way that decision making takes place. And I see that coming, and I'm here to focalize around that, because if we don't, and if we don't step back and look at how did we get here, and we take a real look, well, where did we come from 100 years ago and where are we now, And where is this trend going? This sort of building off a cliff, this road to infinity that is just a fantasy. Then what life does, because of how it is always working for the next succession of life, how are we as humans working for the next succession of human life? The next 7 generations. With our current entropic model and our current way of navigating, we don't have a strategy that we're following that thinks even remotely about. No, it's just about right now we need to create more jobs. Right now we need to create more growth. This will be good for the economy because the economy drives everything. Yeah, but the economy is also eroding the entire social, emotional, cultural, and even the financial landscape of the people that don't operate in that corporatized structure. And quite frankly, it's not human nature to be corporatized, to be in a corporation, to be working our ways behind computer screens in buildings that are air conditioned, that are totally ecologically unsound altogether. That's not really what we're here for. And so there is, when we shift our orientation to Syntropy, so much more integration in architecture. When Syntropy enters architecture, we're actually going to design buildings that are bioresonant to the human inhabitants that sit there. We're not going to have these square corners all the time. We're actually looking at what is the flow in this building. Because when we better the flow in a building, we're better the health of the people in the building. And so we're bettering the outcomes of what the building was built for if there's a corporate entity within that. And so any businessman that understands that it wants to stay in business into the future will hugely benefit from adopting syntropic ways of relating to its business now for the future. That everything in life performs a function with purpose. You just have to question the function. And of course, for us humans, we have to be willing to question the function. Because most of us are actually so kind of compromised that we don't even know that that's a choice. With everything in life performing a function with purpose, everything in life has a gift and a talent. And that gift and talent is a natural expression. There's no expectation of the apple tree producing apples. And then the apple tree says, all right, well, that would be $25, because, I've given you all these apples. No, the gift and the spirit in the apple tree is to produce those apples and reach its peak production. We are no different to trees, really. It's just that we are a little bit more biodiverse on our internal spirited and emotional sort of stratas, as it's called. We have more like an internal landscape, our mind, our feelings, and of course trees have feelings too, and they probably also think. It's just that there's not a tree in the world that goes into the frequency when it has been a drought. Like I don't know about you, but I am just so pissed off right now. It hasn't rained for like 6 weeks. I am just entirely over this. Like, why am I even here? Nothing in nature, not even animals, go into that. Only traumatized animals will not want to be somewhere. And so life is in continual, unconditional acceptance. Life in itself is utterly free. It places no stipulation over the circumstances that it finds itself in. It does not go into the future, and it does not go into the past. It doesn't go like, well, last year was a really good monsoon, wasn't it? And this year it's dry. No, it is nature is wholly and solely in the business of isness. And in that, it then effortlessly performs its function with purpose. And life forms have a multitude of functions. And just wanted to share this with you because all that I'm just doing is performing my function. But I have no attachment to what my function may be for another human being, because I don't want to pre-think how I may be improving their life, setting them free. Like, no, I'm free from the attachment or fantasy of changing anybody, which then allows me to be more free in myself and not preoccupied with how I have to word things. And yeah, this may very likely mean that some businesses in the future are just not gonna be able to be sustained. But that's also because in any system of agroforestry, certain species will naturally leave the system when their function is complete. And so when we have that clearing and it's all grass, then the shrubs come, there's still grass, then the pioneer species come, there's still grass, and then when the next succession comes, because grass has a certain light requirement, grass naturally leaves the system. It just moves out. And that's just a natural flow. And of course humans can be, based on lack and fear, be attached to, I'm a grass, I want to stay in the system, so I'm going to be a guinea grass, I'm going to be prickly as hell, and I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to try. What if that grass species is actually part of the larger ecosystem? And it is. What if that person that sees itself as a grass can actually transform himself or herself into becoming part of the next succession? Because that tree has way more life requirements. See the tree as a corporation and see the grass as a business that doesn't actually really enhance life. Those people can just withdraw and find themselves really beautiful functional placement within a tree species. And so I see that there will be a lot of transitioning occurring over the next 10, 20 years that can be very painful. But if we adopt a syntropic way of thinking, we don't have to judge and call something bad. We can just question the function as to what is it doing. Because by saying, this is wrong and I don't want this to happen, we're in stagnance and we're not in flow. We're not accepting that life is ever changing, which is what life is. We want to maintain the status quo and build on the status quo. That doesn't necessarily mean that this tower that we're building that just gets higher and higher and higher, that it's not at some point just totally going to crumble under its own weight. And the question would be, who's going to be at the effect of that crumbling? Not just the people in the building, not just the people that have some form of interrelated activity with those buildings. I'm talking about our children and our children's children and our cultural inheritance that I find really hard to find in the cultural mindset. From a purely human place, our culture is still to emerge itself. Because we're in a corporate culture, we're in a governed culture, we're in an educated culture, which does not necessarily honor the intrinsic values of what it is to be a human culture. And as corny as it sounds, that's a culture of love. Because life is that.